Then we were interested in finding out what sort of options are students and parents considering. And what you're seeing here, these percentages represent the percentage of seniors who said they were likely or very likely to consider each of these different options. And our goal for this question really was to find out, are students considering more radical things this year compared to previous years? They were most willing to consider working part-time, attending a public rather than a private in some cases to keep costs down. No big surprise there. About a quarter to a third were actually willing to consider changing to a major that might be in greater demand or have a higher income potential. This is, really very similar to what Dr. Murtha was talking about in terms of students perhaps shifting away from liberal arts. And you can see that about almost 40%, so 39% of the seniors said they are likely to consider changing their major. 34% said they were likely to consider taking more than 4 years. Some were even considering living at home and commuting to school or beginning their studies at a community or 2-year. And then 27% were thinking about attending a school out of state. Much fewer students were thinking of the more radical options that we tested. So only 10% said they were likely to consider working full-time and attending school as a part-time student. Only 8% thought they might take a year off to earn work before going to school. And then 7%, almost 7%, said they are likely to consider some sort of distance learning or online option as an alternative to a more traditional education. So in the same vein, looking at sort of what their preferences are, this is a question we often ask students. Essentially we're just asking them, what do you prefer? Do you prefer to go to a public, a private, or are you not sure? And if it's a private, a religious or an unreligious school, or not religiously affiliated school. And you can see here students and parents' responses. And they're very similar. And the thing to point out here is that most of the students and parents were anticipating going to a public institution. These percentages are very much in line with the percent of students who do end up going to a public institution, so nothing unusual there. And when we correlated this with their concerns about the economy, there really was no relationship. So students who were more concerned about the economy were not necessarily more likely to be considering or preferring a public institution. Their preferences were their preferences and seemed to have no relationships to any economic concerns that they might currently be having. And lastly, looking at the unsure group here, we thought this was a particularly interesting group. It's not unusual, even in February and March, to have students who say, I don't know what my preferences are, or they're just very open-minded. They've applied to both public and private, and they're going to let things happen as they will. But we did find out that the students who were these students were less likely to apply early, and they applied to more institutions. So maybe these students were shopping around a little bit more. And we thought perhaps they might be a little more price sensitive as a result. And again, just there was no relationship between their preference for a public or a private and their concern about the economy.
Because of the unique makeup of our panel, I think I'll start with the middle question here, and that is, did you observe students shifting away from the liberal arts programs and more toward the pre-professional? Mary, you described your institution as a liberal arts institution, but there are some more professional directed programs in your portfolio and less others. Did you see any shift at your institution?
No, we did not see any shift at the institution. In fact, what we saw is really because of just the hard work we all have to do who are running liberal arts institutions in terms of explaining and articulating what this does for a person over the course of a lifetime. I think we've gotten much better of that because even within our professional programs, whether it's businesses or in the sciences, we infuse the teaching that goes on in a liberal arts institution, inquiry, exploration, critical thinking. So it really is not so much what we are as an institution, but how we teach and how we bring our students along. So we didn't see that shift. Where we have seen a significant growth are in our science majors, because for us, addressing the issue of STEM is a big push, but I see science and liberal arts and innovation and inquiry as hand in hand. So for us, Kathy, we did not see that. We did not see sudden shifts of students enrolling as business majors or any of those things that one might imagine. The other thing is that when students get to your school, they are completely unpredictable as to what they might do in shifting majors. They can have a conversation going in with all good intentions that they're going to be majoring in X, and get there and lo and behold decide that they want to major in fine and performing arts. So, how they come in is not necessarily how they go out.
We think we see a heightened interest in programs that are more connected to jobs. We have a lot of offerings for adults. We have numerous graduate programs, and graduate applications, as we know from the national data, have been very strong in this cycle and sort of follow the history of the economic disruption causing somewhat of an uncertainty at the undergraduate level, at least nationally, and a heightened interest at the graduate level. So since we admit in both of those streams, the clear increased interest is at the graduate level. As I said earlier, the pattern among undergraduates is still evolving. And so while it looked like the typical liberal arts programs which were challenged at the start, they seem to have legs at the end of this race. And my guess is that at my institution, what Kathy sees more, what we've talked about here, what you've mentioned earlier, we will end up seeing a very consistent pattern, actually. What Mary was talking about at her school, I think, indicates a kind of the enduring value of education, the enduring role of quality in the admissions process, and we might call it an inelasticity of aspirations. The economy goes up and down, but for quite a long period, what we've seen is that at the undergraduate level, students stick with where they were headed before that economic cycle took a turn.
If you look carefully at the way the question was asked in the survey, both before and after, that is in March and in May, there are 1,000 students, 1,100 students who actually participated both in March and May, who in March had said they were at least willing to consider, and here's the quote, changing to a major that will be in greater demand to have a higher income potential, which is not the same as switching out of liberal arts. So we got to be careful because there are overarching issues that relate to STEM, for example, and if there's stimulus money that suggests there are going to be more jobs, or if there's a guidance counselor who pushes somebody to get more interested in physics and math, that may be a good thing. It may involve a switch, and it may involve the economy. Interestingly enough, when those 1,100 students were asked again in May, what are you actually going to do? 42% of them, and this is a soft number again, statistics no substitute for judgment here, folks, but this is statistically quite significant. 42% of these folks said that they are indeed planning to do some switching. Interestingly enough, following up on what Mary said, if you look at College Board data for people who first register for the SATs and then take them again, there are huge percentages of switchers even while kids are still in high school. So it's against that backdrop of variability that we have to study the issue.
I agree with Dr. Murtha that my interactions with students have shown them to be a little bit more job focused this year. One thing I was struck by at the survey is that among the categories of factors that the students considered that they were most willing, the top three all had something to do with money. Working part-time in college, attending public college instead of private, attending public college in their own home state for in-state lower tuition. I was also struck by what happened when we asked, this was when they were applying versus when they actually enrolled. Were there any differences in what they said and what they actually did? And there were three that had significant shifts. and those were also somehow connected to money. That they were much more likely to live at home and commute to save money. They were more likely to start off at a community college and then transfer, and more likely to attend an in-state public college for the lower tuition. And went from the living at home, their intentions at the start being 33% to 69% what they actually did. And starting off at community college, started off at 27%, and that switched to 51%. So I was struck by how a lot of the most significant factors and the factors where they changed their minds all had to do with how they're going to pay for the college.